Good evening, good evening, good evening. How is everyone doing this Saturday evening, about to be Sunday morning in about 3 minutes? Welcome to the Jelly Moosa's Cafe, to Yemima's World. I am your Jelly Moosa. I am Yemima, and it is good to be back in the building again, in the land of the living, as the old folks used to say. It is a warm Saturday evening here in the Hampton Roads area. It's been warm all day long, really. I've been chilling most of the day, and I do that most weekends. I don't have a social life. I really do not have a social life, and it is really, really sad because I am not old. I am a queenager. I am seasoned, but I am not old, and I do not have a social life, and mainly because I really don't have any friends here in this area. I moved here in 2020, the end of 2020, right at the end of when the pandemic started, in February, March of 2020, and I moved here to the Hampton Roads area in October of 2020. And so, of course, during those 2 years, you didn't really go anywhere or do anything because you were kind of stuck in the house. I did work a few jobs. I had a few jobs since I've been here. But since the pandemic has ended, kind of, sort of, but I don't have any friends here. And so I don't have a social life. And let me tell you, you need friends. You absolutely need friends, especially if you are single, if you don't have any children, and if you don't have family that live close by that you can connect weekly or even monthly. You need friends. I have family. The closest family is an hour away. I do have a brother that lives in this area, but he's busy all the time with his family. So let me tell you, I realized last year around this time that I needed to have some friends in this area. I need to make friends. Someone to hold you accountable for things, someone that you can call on when you need help, and for some people to make memories with, to look back on and say, oh, remember that time we hung out and did this, that, and the other. Now, prior to the pandemic, I lived in another city, same state, but in another city. And I had friends because I lived in that city for like 30 years. So I had friends and we would hang out sometime, or I would go to different places. And it didn't bother me to go places alone because I would run into people that I knew. But here, I have not made any friends. And last year, this time, I realized I need some friends. It was Mother's Day. And let me give you a backstory first. I used to have this car, this SUV, and it kept breaking down on me, and I was having to put like money into this vehicle. I didn't want to buy a new one. I just wanted to keep fixing it, and it'd break down, and I wanted to fix it again. So my father, I had a dream about my father, and my father has been an ancestor for 18 years. And this was last year that I had a dream about him. And I don't often dream about my father. He does not come to me unless he really has something that he wants to tell me, something that he wants to do for me, or something that he just wants to say. He's on the other side again. He's been over there for 18 years. He's been an ancestor. So he's chilling. He's doing his thing. He's content. He's happy. So I had put some money in my car. I had to put a alternator on my car, which was expensive. And then I had a dream about my dad. And in the dream, Dad came to me and said, I'm going to give you, baby girl, $3,000 for your car. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I just put the alternator on there, so I don't know what the $3,000 is for. So the dream stayed on my mind, whatever. So about 3 weeks later, after I had the dream, I got a call from a college to do a presentation, and they were paying me a very, very, very nice wage to do the presentation. I said, okay, well, that's nice. And then about a month later, I got a call, or I got an email from a TV show that wanted to interview me. They had seen some footage of the work that I do. And the work that I do is that I do narrative restoration, where I go onto historical sites and I restore the narrative of our ancestors and actually tell their real history and their real stories. And so the TV show wanted to interview me, and I was like, okay, cool. And I gave them my price, and they were like, well, we don't normally pay people when we interview them. And I was like, well, you don't want to interview me because if you think I'm coming out to a historical site where my historical plantation, where my ancestors were held in bondage and worked for free for centuries, and you think I'm going to tell you their history for free? Come on now, Missy Ann. We can do better than this. So we hemmed and hawed, and then finally they agreed to my price. So boom, there was the money that Dad said he was going to give me for my car. I'm still thinking, okay, well, I got this money. I put it in my account, didn't touch it. So I was driving my SUV, and I started to hear a noise coming from the back of it. And I was like, what in the world? It was a high-pitched, like, squeal almost. So I took it in, and they checked it, and they said that the rear axle was cracked, but they couldn't repair it. It had to be replaced. And it wasn't like they could go to the junkyard and find one. They had to order the part. I said, okay. So they fixed my car to a tune of $2,800. I said, okay, well, that's where the money that Dad said he was sending me. Thank you, Dad, because I would have been lost in the sauce if he hadn't come through. So I got the car fixed. That was around March of last year. So fast forward to May, excuse me. In May, it was Mother's Day weekend. I was headed to South Hill to my mom and dad's house for Mother's Day, and it was pouring down raining. I mean, it was raining buckets. Everybody on the highway had their flashers on. Nobody was going over 45 miles an hour. It was just really, really bad. And this car came up beside me, and he slowed down, and he was pointing to my car. And I was like, what is he pointing to? So it was starting to freak me out. So I pulled over, and I got out of the car, and it was raining. It let up just a little bit. And I looked, and my rear tire on the driver's side looked like it had just exploded. Now, how I was able to still drive that car on that wet road was nothing but the ancestors and the Most High working overtime, because there was no way. I was like 15 miles from where I live. And so I didn't even notice. I didn't feel anything different. So I got a flat tire. So I called my insurance company and got a tow to come and pick me up and take my car to get the tire replaced because I didn't have a spare. So while I was waiting for the tow truck driver, I was calling some places nearby to see if they could replace the tire. It was a Saturday afternoon, and it was about maybe 2:30. Tow truck driver gets there. I tell him where we're going. He takes me there and drops my car, and he leaves. So I go into the place, and I'm talking to the lady, and I tell her that I just called and blah, blah, blah. And she says, oh, ma'am, I'm sorry. We don't have your size tire today. I have to order it. It won't come until Monday. And I'm like, ma'am, I can't leave my car here. I need my car. I really thought I was just going to put the tire on and be on my way. And I'm sitting there thinking, what the heck am I going to do? And I had no one to call. Absolutely no one to call. My brother was out of town. And like I said, everybody else were an hour, at least an hour away. I had no one to call. So I started calling some other places to see if they had a tire that they could do that day. And I called a place that was closer to my home, which is another 15, 20 miles going back the other way. But they said, yeah, they had the tire, they could put it on. So now I'm trying to figure out how am I going to get my car back to this place and me get there too. So I'm going to have to call the tow truck again. So I called my insurance company, and I just knew they were going to charge me because it was going to be considered the same tow. And when I talked to her, she said, no, we'll discount it still as one tow and we won't charge you. So she sent the same tow truck driver back to this place where he dropped me off. He puts it back on the tow truck. So I'm walking to his truck, and I'm about to get in, and I see a little boy in there. And I'm like, is this your son? Is he going to be okay with me riding? And he says, oh, ma'am, you can't ride. And I said, and I'm like, say what now? He said, yeah, company rules, you can't ride, COVID. And I was like, dude, I just rode with you here and COVID was still going on. It didn't just start back up in the last like half an hour. So he said, yeah, I'm sorry, but you can't ride. And I said, well, why did you allow me to ride the first time? He said, because I couldn't leave you stranded. And that's what you're doing now. You're leaving me stranded. So he wouldn't let me ride. So now I'm still stranded because I can't get to my car. I have no one to call to come pick me up to take me to my car. I'm like, this is ridiculous. So I ended up calling a taxi cab. And again, I'm like 15, 20 miles from where my car is. He comes and he takes me to my car and they put the tire on. And when they all finished, when it was all said and done, it was all done to the tune of $385. And so I realized I don't have any friends to call when I need them for something as simple as a ride somewhere. So I'm trying to get out. No, I'm not. I think about getting out and going out and connect with people. But I guess I'm also, I'm also very, very leery because it's so much craziness in this world that you just don't know who to trust. And I'm afraid to trust people that I don't know. It's crazy. It's crazy. I just watched a movie on Netflix last night, and I think it's called Love Lives Here or Here Lives Love. And it started out as a rom-com. I said, oh, this is cute. This is like something new. This is a romantic comedy. I was really digging it. That thing turned into Get Out by Jordan Peele just as quick. I was like, what the hell just happened? What happened? And so I'm like, do I really need friends? Yeah, I do. Am I afraid to go out and make friends because I don't know people? Yes, I am. So, any suggestions of how I can make friends safely and not have to worry about being deleted or worry about, I don't know, anything that's crazy? Email me and give me some suggestions, please, because, again, I have no social life. And I would like to date again at some point before I get too old. I don't want my first date, we're discussing what senior citizen home we see each other in the next 5 to 10 years, or actually meet someone in a home. So yeah, social life is in the toilet. It's tanked. It is really, really tanked. All right, so let's get started with tonight's conversation. Before we get started, as always, I give honor and praise to the Most High, to Mother and Father, God and Goddess, to my ancestors, my elevated, beloved ancestors, my Egunguns. I give you honor and praise to my ancestors of the Tuareg nation of Mali, Africa, and to my ancestors of the Balanta nation of Guinea-Bissau. I give you praise. Abene, abene, abene. So tonight's episode is part 2 of Divorcing Jesus and Finding a Peace that Surpasses All Understanding. Hallelujah. I'm just playing it out. So the first episode, or the first part, was me growing up as a secular Christian. So I think I got up to when I moved out of the house, and I left my mom and father's house when I was 18 years old. I moved to the city, which wasn't a big city, but it was big to me coming from a small town with one stoplight. I moved in with my oldest sister and her daughter, my niece. And when I moved in, I can't remember if she was attending church at that time. I don't think that she was. I think she did go back a couple of years later after I moved in, but she wasn't attending like regularly like we were when we were all living at home. And so I didn't attend either. I was working at a fast food restaurant, and I met a young boy, a year older than me, at a fast food restaurant. And, we hooked up and dated and fell in love. And we dated for 4 years, and then we got married. Still kids. I was 22. He was 23. Way too young to be married. But we did. We got married. And he was Jehovah's Witness. And I didn't know anything about Jehovah's Witnesses other than the fact that we used to hide from them when we were younger, when they used to come to the house. My mom would say, "Don't open the door for them people." She would say, "I don't know what they're talking about. Don't open the door for them people." So we wouldn't open the door for those people. But he was Jehovah's Witness. Or I should say he was raised Jehovah's Witness. He wasn't attending the Kingdom Hall. His mother was a staunch Jehovah's Witness. His father was agnostic. He didn't really have a belief either way. And his mother and I did not really see eye to eye or get along because I was not Jehovah's Witness. I was a Christian. And I thought Jehovah's Witnesses were Christians, but I found out a lot of stuff that really disturbed me about them. So his mother didn't take to me because I wasn't Jehovah's Witness, and he could have brought home anybody as long as they were Jehovah's Witness. It could have been white, Asian, green, pink, yellow, blue, or orange. Now, his father didn't care what religion I was as long as I was black. So he couldn't bring home nothing else. So it was an interesting dynamic. And I learned a lot about Jehovah's Witnesses. I learned that they don't celebrate any holidays at all except for wedding anniversaries. That's the only thing that they celebrate. No birthdays, Christmas, none of that. They can't give blood. They can't do blood transfusions. They cannot join the military. And this one, they can't go into a church. And I was like, what are you, vampires? I couldn't understand them not being able to go into a church. I guess unless it was a funeral. But for anything else, they could not go inside of a church. Excuse me. And I couldn't understand that. But so when we got married in my parents' front yard, because remember I told you my father had the prettiest pristine yard ever. And so it was perfect for a wedding. And so I asked my my ex-husband at that time, I said, well, what's going to happen if it rains? Because we're going to have some place to go if it rains. Is your mother, is she not going to come into the church? And he said, no, she won't. She'll sit in the car if it's raining, but she's not coming into church. And I just thought that was the weirdest thing. But anywho, so I wasn't going to his Kingdom Hall, and I wasn't going to any church at that time. I took kind of like a hiatus from church. I had moved out of the house, and my mom and dad never forced us to go. I went again because my friends were there. It was fun. I had a good time at church. I loved going and seeing people and hanging out and, seeing my grandmother and my aunties and stuff. So, but I didn't join a church. I took probably, maybe 9 years where I didn't go to church regularly. I would go home for holidays like Mother's Day, Easter, Christmas, Thanksgiving. And even though we may not have gone to church during those times, I would go back for special church events like homecoming, family and friends day, choir anniversaries, and things like that. So I would go, and he would go with me, and he would actually go in the church. And I would remember asking him, aren't you afraid you're going to catch on fire or something? And he was like, no, as long as my mom doesn't find out. It's like, you really don't think she knows that you're going to church with me? Okay. But anywho, I digress. So it took maybe, 9 years from actually going to church on a regular basis or even joining a church. So in probably the 8th or 9th year of our marriage, we started to have problems. And I know in hindsight, the problems came from us being so young and getting married. Again, I was 22, he was 23. We were still children. And in hindsight now, and I look back, we had absolutely nothing in common. Nothing. No thing. Nothing. We didn't like the same music. We didn't like the same type of movies. We didn't like to go to the same places. We just had nothing in common. Different religious backgrounds. Nothing. Just nothing in common. But we made it work for that long, I guess, based on sex. That's the only thing I could think of. So around the 7th, 8th, or 9th year, I can't remember which one. I think it was the 8th year. I will say 8th, put it in between. We started having problems in the marriage. And I decided to go back to church, thinking that maybe that's why we were having problems. And so I started going to the church that my two sisters were going to. And I liked it. It was nice. The preacher could preach. And I think I said in my one of my other episodes that usually people don't join churches for what they do in the community, but for how the preacher hoop and how the choir sings. And that was the reason that I joined. The preacher could preach and the choir could sing. And it was a huge church. It was one of those, it was old. It was over 100 years old, and it was huge. And it was the church where they said was the money church. It was the money church where they had judges and politicians and nurses and attorneys in the church. And so it was the church of money. So it racked in some money on Sundays. But I liked it. And I made friends there. I made friends. I never sang in the choir there, but I did become the minister of drama. And I had never had to do this before. But when I joined the church, and I don't know if this is every black church or some black churches, I don't know. It was a Baptist church. But when you join the church, they give you a form to fill out so they can figure out what ministry suits you best. And so for me, drama suited me best. And so I became the minister of drama. I was in charge of putting on plays for the church and skits and things of that nature. And it was fun. I liked doing it. And I stayed there for a long time. And again, I made some really, I won't say friends. I had some really good associates because, again, as I said, when you belong to a Black church, there's always something to do there. And so I was always at church and never at home. And that was putting even a bigger strain on my marriage. So, yeah, I enjoyed it though. I had a good time. And it was drama. Oh boy. It was drama in the church. The pastor was divorced, and there were so many married men dipping here, dipping there. The minister of music was dipping in the choir, even married a couple of the members. So yeah, it was a lot of drama, but I liked it. I liked the drama. So I stayed there for a long time. I want to say maybe 7 or 8 years I stayed there. And it got to the point with my husband that we decided to separate. And then I filed for divorce. Excuse me. And so we went our separate ways. And I was still at the church, and we went our separate ways. And then, I don't know, I just got tired of the drama in the church, and I was wanting to find something that was more, I don't know, church focused, more God focused, more community focused. So I was going to start looking for another church. And one of my friends that I met there, she was fairly new, but she was kind of getting tired of the rhetoric at the church and the drama there as well. And so she had left. She had married one of the members there, and they decided to leave the church. And they found another church home. Oh boy. So, and I hate to speak ill of the dead, but in order to tell the story, I'm going to have to speak of it. So y'all remember Eddie Long, right? That was the pastor in Atlanta who was always preaching against homosexuality and then was sending pictures to young boys in a medium tank top. So yeah. So back in 2004, it was 2004 because it was before my dad passed. Back in 2004, he was planting churches across this great nation. And he planted one in the city where I live. So my friend and her husband had visited the church, and he would have his associate pastors to go and plant these churches. So my friends visited the church a couple of times, and they liked it, so they were asking me, "You should come. You know, I know you're looking for something else, so you should come." I'm like, "Okay, I'll come." So I went to the church, and it was cool. The pastor that they sent, he could preach. He was really good. They didn't have a choir. Again, it was a starter church, and so they didn't even have like a building. They would meet in places like a movie theater on Sunday morning before the theater opened, conference rooms, libraries, wherever they could find to meet. That's where they would meet. And so I said, okay, well, it's a starter church. And, you know, I'm not looking for fanfare. I'm looking for someone that's really going to preach the word and da-da-da-da-da. So I joined the church with them. No, I did not join the church. I just started going and with them. So it had about, I don't know, 6 or 7 members at first. And the pastor that came to start the church, he brought his mother. He came from Atlanta. He brought his mother. And there was another woman and her daughter that was there. And then a few members that joined from the area. So I was trying to figure out who was the chick and the little girl. And I have a way of seeing things that are right in front of other people's face, and they probably see it too. They just don't say anything. But I have not learned to control my face when I see stuff that just doesn't make sense. So we had Bible study one night, and the lady got up to testify that she was grateful to, be in the Virginia area, coming from Atlanta, that she had sold her house and her daughter had moved. And I'm looking at her like, wait a minute, hold up, partner. Of all the people for this preacher, now he was married with 2 kids. Of all the people for this preacher to bring with him to Virginia, he bring you? And you sold your house? Now, there are 3 reasons why a young woman with a child would do such a thing. They are running from Dick. They are running to Dick. Or running with Dick. I don't know. So I come to find out she was running with. So her and the pastor were apparently having an affair. And I'm looking like, seriously, this what we doing? And I'm looking at my friends like, seriously, this what y'all doing? Because they were very, 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 very religious on the surface, on paper. Very religious. So I couldn't understand why they would even want to be a part of this drama when you left the church we were attending because it was so much drama. And now we're coming here and it's still drama. So wait a minute. Check it out now. The wife was still in Atlanta. She had 2 boys in school and she didn't want to take them out of school. So she waited until summer before she came. The day that the woman showed up, the day the wife showed up, it was probably maybe 15 members at the church at that time. We had a church outing at King's Dominion to welcome her, and the mistress and the little girl was there. And when I tell you she couldn't get herself together to save her life, she was so upset that the wife was coming to be with her husband and bringing their children. And she couldn't get her little girl. She just kept yelling at the poor child. And the more I looked at that child, the more I realized, oh, wait a minute. So I think I know who daddy might be. So the lady, the mistress, left the church after King's Dominion because she just could not be around the wife and the husband. And it was so bad for her that, and this is very sad, this is very, very sad, she tried to commit suicide because that's how bad it was for her dealing with him and his wife and children. So when it all came to light that this pastor under Eddie Long, moved to Virginia with his mistress and his mistress' daughter and his mother. So for his mother to go along with this foolishness, it's like, what in the world? So I didn't stay there long. After all of this came out, at that time my father was getting sick, so I didn't stay at that church after all of this came out. And I even had some drama that happened to me, and nothing even remotely close to what they were doing, but just stuff that was out of pocket, out of line, and just crazy. So I ended up leaving that church after all of that came about. And I think the wife, because Eddie Long had the nerve to sit this pastor down because he was out of pocket. I'm like, really, Eddie? Really? Wow. Okay. So while he was being sat down, his wife actually became the pastor of the church. I'm like, wow, okay, y'all really doing the most. So anyway, I left the church, and the next year, my dad passed away. He joined the ancestors. And so I felt uncovered. I didn't have a covering. I was newly divorced. My father transitioned. I didn't attend any church. And so I felt like I didn't have anyone or anything covering me. And I wasn't sure what to do. So my friends, the ones who invited me, the husband and wife, who invited me to go with them to this drama club, they decided to become ministers. Now, did you know that you do not have to go to divinity school or theology school to become a pastor and have a church? Did you know you can take online courses and get you a certificate that makes you a minister? And that is what they did. They both went online and took a course and became ministers of the gospel. Now, of course, they didn't have a brick and mortar, so it was the same pattern. We'll meet wherever, hotel, conference rooms, in our home, in the park, wherever we could meet. Now, don't get me wrong. I loved them. I did. At that time, I did. They came to my dad's services. He was an amazing, amazing preacher. He could preach and he could pray. So he gave the prayer at my father's services, and she gave the reading of the scriptures, the Old and New Testament for the scriptures at my father's services. So at that time, I did. I loved them because I thought that we were friends. But they went online and they got their minister license, and we would meet at different places. Of course, I joined their church. There was really no joining thing where you had to fill out any paperwork. Just come, whenever you want to come, just come. So again, we're meeting all different places. So in order to build their church, they would find people who didn't have a church home or didn't have a way to get to church. So some of our members were part of the VA, I think. And they were in the VA because they had some substance abuse problems. So we would have to go and pick them up on Sunday and bring them to church and then take them back to the VA, which I guess it was no problem. And then, Lord, it was truly a congregation of misfits. We were like, I don't know, we were just misfits, just a bunch of misfit Christians. And then there was a couple who moved from Maryland to Virginia. Now, according to them, they were homeless in Maryland. And so they moved to Virginia with a husband and wife. They had a little boy. And at the time they moved, she was pregnant with their second child. Child, Bonnie and Clyde should have been their name. So they came in with the sob story of, we don't have anything. We have nothing. They got into an apartment on Section 8, which I understand. I ain't knocking that. People need help. Do you? So people were feeling sorry for them and was like, well, we want to donate so you can have something because you don't have anything. We want to make sure that you have, especially for the baby that's coming. Now, the wife claimed she was legally blind. She could halfway see, but she could see some stuff. So people were donating. So I remember I was working at a company and I was telling one of my friends, my coworkers, about them. And she said, you know what? I'm getting ready to get rid of my living room suit. She said, I was going to take it to Goodwill, but if they can get someone to come pick it up, she said, they can have it, no charge. So I talked to them and the church got together and went and got the living room suit and da-da-da-da-da. So one Wednesday night, it was my turn to go pick them up to bring them to Bible study. So I go to their apartment. Y'all, their apartment looked like a showroom floor and a furniture store. They had two of everything. So instead of them telling people, no, thank you, we already have, someone's already given us this, they decided to take everything that everybody gave them. I am not lying. They had 2 sofas. They had 2 small dining room tables. Now, the apartment was not that big. They had 2 microwaves, one sitting on top of the other one. They had 2 TVs. I was like, you have got to be kidding me. These mofos are scam people out of their stuff. It was the craziest thing I had ever seen in my life. And I'm thinking to myself, the drama in this church trumps the other church 10 times over. This was crazy. I was going from drama to drama to drama to drama. And it was just the craziest thing. Still had not really found the church to cultivate my spirituality or to even, I didn't even feel like I had gone to church. I didn't feel like I was any closer to God or closer to the saints or closer to anyone. So the pastor and his wife, my friends, they felt sorry for these people. They really had a soft spot for them. So the pastor took the guy under his wing. He was like, well, I'm going to give you work to do. You'll find work and you're going to be my armor bearer and you're going to, help me around the church and blah, 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 blah. Well, when my daddy passed away, he had an organ that he used to play. My brother had given him an organ for one of his birthdays. And so when he passed away, my brother gave the organ to my friend who was the pastor, because he played keyboard and could sing. So he said, I really think you'll take care of it. Well, the pastor gave the man who had moved from Maryland, who had 2 of everything, he gave him the key to our storage where we kept all the stuff locked up. And I don't know who he got to give him a ride, but the pastor went there on Sunday morning and everything was going. All of our musical equipment, we didn't have that much, but whatever we had in there was gone. The only reason they did not get the keyboard was because the pastor had taken it home that night to rehearse for Sunday morning. It was the biggest mess. I was like, this is absolutely crazy. So we still didn't have no building. We still meeting in the house, meeting in the park, meeting in conference rooms. And this is like a year has gone by and we still have not gone any further. So now I'm starting to see really the craziness of these people. And not just the pastors, but anybody who joined that church was cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. So they found a building, an old abandoned warehouse. And the warehouse used to be a club. And they used to have strip shows there. And I know this because I used to go. So this abandoned warehouse, it was definitely in the hood, in the heart of one of the hoods in the city. And we would go on Sunday mornings and we would have to clean up beer bottles from around the door. Sometimes we would find used condoms. It was just awful, just absolutely awful. And then the rent on the building was crazy. And we only had like 12 members in this church. The other church had about 15. This one had about 12. And we would meet in this warehouse in the wintertime. It was freezing. In the summertime, it was hot. It was just craziness, just absolute craziness. So then the pastors, they started to have trouble in their marriage. And I don't know, I guess they got married too quick. They didn't date long before they were married. And a lot of times Christian people will get married so they can have sex. I swear to God, I know quite a few Christians that have gotten married just so they can legally have sex in the eyes of God. I don't know. That's what they did. And I think that's what happened to them, that they got married so they could have sex legally, even though they were already living together. But I guess for it to look good to other people, they went ahead and got married. So they were starting to have some troubles in their marriage. And it was evident whenever he would preach, you could tell he was talking about her. Whenever she would preach, you could tell she was talking about him. And it was just the biggest mess. And it was clear to everyone that this wasn't going to last long. So one Sunday, he sent a text. The pastor sent a text, said that this was a very important Sunday, and he asked that no children come to services that day. And we were like, okay. So we go to church, and he's there, and she's not. And I kind of knew, what was going to be said when he said no children. So he did a Jimmy Swaggart, and he didn't cry, but he did a confession that he had stepped out of the marriage, and he had told his wife, and they were working on it, and he was still going to be our pastor. And then he began to preach. And I'm looking like, what the hell? So after service that day, one of the other members was also close to them. And her and I went to their house, and we sat him down and talked to him. And we was like, you can't stand before God's people with this. No, you're going to have to sit down, bruh. And you two work it out. If you're going to make it, make it. If you're not, then split, whatever. But you're not going to be You're not going to confess that and then stand before God's people and preach the word as if nothing has happened. Like, you're a wounded soldier. And when soldiers are wounded, they don't send them back out into battle. They sit them down and let them heal. I said, y'all got healing to do. No. So he sat down for, I think it was a month, because it was a month before Easter. And Easter sunrise service was the Sunday that he was coming back. And I remember it was dark when we went, and we were still in that warehouse in the hood, and it was freezing. There was no heat in the warehouse at all. And he preached, and there was no power behind his preaching. There was nothing. It was just powerless. It was seasonless. It was nothing. And that was the last time he preached. And after that, the church disbanded, and they divorced. And I'm like, okay. Now, in that church, we had some strange characters. We had some things that would happen on Sunday morning that I thought sometimes I was being punked. Sometimes I thought stuff was happening in the spirit and only I could see it and nobody else. So one of the guys that we would have to pick up, he was part of the VA substance abuse program. For some odd reason, the pastor decided to make him minister of health. Stay with me now. He had a substance abuse problem, and the pastor thought he would be perfect as the minister of health. That's kind of like Stevie Wonder asking Ray Charles, "How do I look?" So the first Sunday morning of his newfound job title as Minister of Health, he decides to stand in front of the church and take us through a yoga exercise. Now, I don't know if y'all know or not, but to a lot of Christians, yoga is demonic. But this church was non-denominational, so it didn't matter. He kept trying to do a tree pose, and every time he would try to do it, he would fall over. And so I'm looking around because I'm thinking, is this stuff happening in the spirit and I'm the only one that can see it? Every time he would hit that tree pose, he would fall over. He said, "Yeah, I was up late last night and I didn't get a lot of sleep." I'm like, dude, you're high. Crazy. We had a woman we used to call the weeping prophet, because every time that she would prophesy, she would cry. I don't care what the prophecy was, she would cry. She'd start off all right. "Daughter, I see your husband in the future. And he's looking for you. I couldn't figure it out. We had one woman who used to wear these beautiful wigs, and every time she would sing, she snatched her wig off. I was like, just stop wearing them. But she would snatch her wig every time she would sing. And that was that church. We're coming up on an hour. And I don't want to keep you long on these episodes because I want to keep you in suspense. Because every church was worse than the one before. So we've gone from me moving to the city, joining the church, the mega church that was filled with money, plenty of drama, everybody sleeping with everybody, to the church where the pastor moves in to town with his mistress and her daughter, to my friends starting their own church and the pastor having an affair. So there's a pattern here. And I started to think, well, hell, is it me? So next episode, that part 3 will be, what church is Jemima going to next? Will the same thing happen? Will the pastors be faithful to each other? Will it be a church that does anything in the community? Will this church have a call on its life? Will Jemima get any closer to God joining this next church? Or is she just going to be a wanderer from church to church? Still, no covering, no church, no husband, no father. Just uncovered, but still on the journey of finding a peace that surpasses all understanding. Because in all of this foolishness, even then I was wondering to myself, Jesus, where are you in any of this? Where are you? So until next time, I will say good evening for now. Have a great day, a great afternoon, a great evening, a great weekend, a great week. Whenever you are listening to this episode, please share these episodes. I know I'm not the only one that have been through this type of foolishness in churches, and that's the reason why you don't go anymore, or that's the reason why you're not a Christian. Christians really need to understand they are the reason people don't want to be Christians anymore. It has nothing to do with Jesus. Because I think the esoteric Jesus, not the one in the Bible, but the esoteric man, the esoteric figure of Jesus is amazing. But the biblical Jesus and the Christians that worship this biblical Jesus, some of y'all crazy as hell. I'm just going to go out and say it. Some of y'all are nut jobs. Hypocritical nut jobs. Until next time, I will bid you adieu. Again, have a great evening, morning, afternoon, weekend, or week, or whatever it is that you have. And I will see you soon. Peace.